This is the Roundtable, a talk show brought to you by the Glastonbury Goddess Conference. In this circle, the priestesses of the ceremonial circle, the weavers of our annual gathering, talk about pivotal topics about our community, spirituality, and goddess. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of the Roundtable by the Glastonbury Goddess Conference, episode 3 of our second season. Feels very Netflix-like, but yeah, we are on our second episode 3. Who would have thought it? Great! It's fantastic. We all thought it, but anyway, we're here. It's great to have you here. So episode 3 is titled The Gender Divine, and before we introduce the topic today, let me introduce a wonderful panel of ceremonialists from the Glastonbury Goddess Conference. We have here today the two weavers of the conference, Katinka Sutens.
Hi, everyone.
Mariam Brigantia.
Hello.
And from the ceremonial circle, Louise Taria.
Hi.
And Caroline Stevens.
Hello.
Ever hoping that I pronounce your surnames correctly. And aside from that, I would love to remember to everyone following us that we see your comments on YouTube and Facebook, so please keep them coming. And also keep coming at the Goddess Conference. This is very important. It's from the 29th of August to the 29th of July to the 3rd of August. It's an in-person event in Glastonbury. We know, you know, but we also know that you like to be reminded of buying the tickets at the website, which is goddessconference.com. So there are, many different tickets available. If you come and stay for just a few days, if you want the full experience, please do book the ticket. If you are a group, please do come in a group. And we have, of course, many deals for you available. So please visit goddessconference.com, contact us, and please be there with us from the 29th of July to the 3rd August in person in Glastonbury, Avalon, the home of your heart. This should be trademarked by the Glastonbury. Back to our topic today. The title is The Gender Divine. And again, it is in the context of this year's Goddess Conference, which is all about sacred union. So we start from divine feminine, divine masculine. Is sacred union bound to duality? Are this definition of the sacred duality or a spiritual polish on the traditional gender narrative where male is strong and active and female is receptive and sensitive? Is sacred union univocally linked to sex and gender, or is it about being human? So today we'll be exploring how sacred union indeed is also about couples. It's about relationships as a couple, or is also about gender. How do sex and gender intervene as concept when talking about divinity and sacred union itself? So very deep topic, lots to cover, very short time. So let's start from here, and I would love to give you my first question, which is the very long one I just posed, to Mariam Brigantia.
Thank you, Andrea. Yes, it is a big question. In my spiritual practice, as everybody might have known already, is that I always go to the natural world, because for me that is very much where I find goddess, where I find the divine, and how she is expressed a lot. And in the natural world, you would think there is like quite a gender divide, but actually it's not. You know, there are also places, species, like trees, for instance, who have both genders and who are not so separate as you might think in nature. And thinking about the goddess I work with most, Bridget, you said is the masculine strong and the feminine this and the masculine that. And one of the things that is, and we found it out also in the last Lover Goddess Conference, is that for instance, also in the spiritual world, is also seen as a divide, for instance, between the sun and the moon, and where the moon is seen as the soft and the receptive, the feminine, and the sun is seen as the masculine and the strong and the heat. Actually, in Bridget, she is both the sun and the moon goddess. So there is that the whole gender thing falls away. In the myth and legends around Bridget. So I don't think it's always such a strong divide, but yeah, it can be, and it's also not always that duality as polarized duality, but yeah, it can be.
Yeah, that's really great, Marion. And I think that there's so much to be said about this, everyone, and different opinions are fine around this because there are so many different angles. And so I think that sacred union is about a meeting of two apparent opposites, and they can be polarized, but then it's about what happens when there is a harmonious merging or meeting between those two apparent opposites or polarized opposites. We live in a world and in bodies and in conditioning of our minds that is certainly dualistic, you and them, or me and you. That is a dualism. And so, whatever form that has, for me, sacred union is that which is found if you step through that portal of apparent opposite or polarized opposites in a willingness to find something that is perhaps more than the sum of the parts. I think that's how I would describe sacred union. And one of the ways, there are many ways of experiencing that. And one of the ways to experience that is through sexuality, which for me is sacred as long as it's consensual. And really, this is not so much about what genders are involved in that expression of harmonious merging into sacred union, though it is held very much within the symbolism and the forms of masculine and feminine, which are not what we are conditioned to believe that they are. It's not masculine is strong and feminine is soft. These are human qualities. And I think this is something that we really need to start thinking differently around. But so maybe it is more like the sort of the meeting of two qualities that have an area of harmony where they are within each other. And so, of course, when you are within each other in the physical, sexual way of expressing that as human beings, then there is your possibility to experience sacred union through that partnership union, through the sexual love relationship union, into something bigger, which is often missed because we're not educated about this, certainly not in the West. There is such a lack of understanding what sacred sexuality really means, which for me is one of the great natural gateways into experiencing what sacred union may be, and which we then give a form because again we are in this dualistic way of being. This is how we are as beings in a world, which is actually symbolic. So whether we call that wisdom and compassion, as in the Buddhist tradition, or whether we call that Shakti and Shiva, or stillness and movement, or in-breath and out-breath, or whether we call that masculine and feminine, or whether we call that light and dark. These are really things that are not actually ever separate. They are within each other always. Yeah, and so there is something here that points towards what sacred union may actually mean, and how we find that so many different gateways to find that, like you were saying, Marion, sun and moon in nature, and our small minds make this very specific, but actually the field of the energy, certainly when we're working with the goddess of love, or love as the divine in whatever form, the field is so huge. We could talk about this for hours. Anyway, that's my little 5 pennies worth. What do you think?
I think what resonated for me there was about the language and the duality and the concept, this idea of merging, and that we definitely need to reclaim language, because I was just thinking about when we can write down symbolisms and deep meanings. Often one of my pet hates is the masculine will have the word positive written under it and feminine will have the word negative written under it. what's that about? That's interesting. But for me personally, when I'm thinking about the duality, I'm thinking about the two parts of the mind, so the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, and the merging of those two. And I think the power that can come in that merging, where the subconscious is worked within in a conscious way, so a way that then our innate wisdom, our innate knowing, our intuition works alongside our logic. So although this isn't to terms with sexuality and gender, there is still that union of parts of the self that are wrapped up in so many other different layers of the self as well. So that's a whole piece in it, woven into this whole beautiful tapestry, I think.
And they're not gendered, are they? Consciousness and intuition
absolutely
or subconscious are not gendered. They're human qualities.
Although interestingly, in some of the work around mermaids, you'll recognize this, Katinka, the subconscious part is kind of allocated yet again to the feminine, isn't it? It's interesting, isn't it? How we just have this tendency as humans, because we're in human bodies, to want to gender and want to separate and want to categorize.
And then we're conditioned by societies which are patriarchic. So there we have it.
I think it's not even that dangerous that certain things got gendered, but it's the other way around. Is then it says that the gender has these qualities. I think that is the thing that happens. Is that I don't mind if the subconscious is seen as the feminine, but then it's like, oh, then the feminine suddenly has all these qualities that are soft and things. But that's for me the wrong way around, because it's not. It's more about you giving form in the human experience of things, but it doesn't mean that then women are like this or men are like this. And if you're not falling in that category of women and men, so then what are you? That is like it's such a strange way and
I think this is where sexuality is so useful, actually, and where the more gender fluidity or indeed sexual fluidity is so interesting. Because if you're more, let's say, bisexual, which means that you can have truly loving and sexually activated, arousing experiences with people of any gender, really. It's not about the gender, it's about the person, it's about the individual, it's about the actions and expressions of a personality rather than the shape of a body, I think for me, and I'm talking about sexuality as sacred, not all the distortions in that field and all the woundings in that field. It is one of the great initiation gateways as human beings. When we mature and when we make healthy choices, the lover's choice, the lover's initiation, to experience this beyond the small mind, beyond the conceptualization of our conditioning, what is actually possible, what is actually there, which is why a lack of education from a religious point of view and from a conditioned society point of view helps the blocking of this natural expansion into sacred sexuality, into the experience of sacred union between, even if that is between the human and the divine experience of our humanness through sexual energy, through sexual union, through loving, but very much in the body, sexual connection. This is how you win if you want a power over structure. Never mind who is on top in that power over structure. This is how you limit people's natural experience that then widens the field and how you would interpret what is masculine, what is feminine, what is you, what is other, what is life. And so actually for me, some of the great teachings in what is happening in the sort of younger than me generations is that there is this much less care about the label and much greater fluidity. I think we have, as a slightly older generation now, a lot to learn from that.
Yeah, I was picking from Katinka though. You had an interesting take, I think, on the fact, but I really like the fact that it's based on sexuality, because sex is something that provides an interaction with the other person in a way, and it's a specific language. So I really love that your take on the thing was related also to your work with sacred sexuality, because that's how not only hearts and minds and souls connect, but also how bodies connect. And there is a divide in a way from yeah, also in the way that the sexes behave and the way the gender then becomes in society. And I think, picking from Caroline and Marion, I think we made gods along the way of our history. We made gods that could resemble and reflect what we thought the genders were supposed to tend to. We have some exceptions of goddesses and gods that do. Uh, they are considered a bit weird or a bit queer because they do things that we're not supposed to be doing in a way. But that tells us that we created, let's say, god of or image of gods, reflecting what the society was. But what's interesting about Katinka though is that, and I want to give an input to this conversation back to our topic, which is, if we were to divide a room, let's say the goddess conference room, we divide a goddess conference based on our sex, meaning genitalia, meaning birth, let's say biological sex of our bodies, you would have a division. And we are supposed to think as a society that those division would, create two groups or more. Well, two groups, sexes are two, biologically it's two. So we will have two groups that have much in common together. But then, if we would ask them, can you divide yourself? Can you split yourself? Not by biological sex, but let's say based on if you had a childhood trauma with your family or not, you would create two entirely different groups that would maybe have much more in common in the way that they face life in a way. So that goes back to the question, when we create this concept of gods in a way, when we create the divine masculine and feminine, I think we all found some very compelling and interesting definition of these, and some very dumb and boring definition of divine masculine and feminine, where you're like, the divine feminine is where I can activate my flower and I can be a princess. Oh my God. That's this kind of things that really, that we like, okay, let's wait a moment. But how are they birthed, and are they dangerous in a way? I mean, are there still paths where we feel uncomfortable talking about divine feminine because we feel they are foraging and bringing on the divide instead of creating a bridge that is the sacred union?
Mm. Yes, that's a lot of questions you're asking in one, I think.
I mean, the gods we created, let's pick the divine feminine, which is very close also to the concept of goddess. Okay, for many of us, maybe the concept of divine feminine is not really close to the concept of goddess.
It
Because
isn't.
it is, but for
I think for
some,
most of us here it is, but for people out there, I think even the word goddess, why is it God and goddess? Why is
exactly.
it not goddess and God?
For me,
Please,
for
it's
me,
all
it's
part of conditioning. And then there's been a counter movement where, we only say goddess and we cannot say divine feminine or divine, heaven forbid, divine masculine. There is no such thing. There's been a counter action to that pendulum, And for me, if we're talking about, is it useful? I mean, yes, sometimes it's useful and sometimes it's not useful. Different things in different situations. For me, the tantric path is always about finding this merging edge where there is no separation and where the form blurs. And I think that is very interesting. Yes, we as humans give form to the divine, whatever form that has, which is to do with the land we live on, the culture we live on, our experiences, our setup socially. It's about and the ideas of what is masculine, what is feminine, which is why historical imagery in relation to how our ancestors saw these things, where there was actually greater fluidity, certainly in other cultures as well, and here in Europe. We often overlook Europe. We have such a rich heritage in this, So there is really, this is all through different lenses, how we look at things. And for me, sacred union is actually putting two different glasses over. You know, when you have the eye test and they do the different thing, you know, and sometimes it's blurry and then suddenly something clears. It's a bit like that. It's a stupid symbolism to use, really. But
No,
it's
I like that one. I really like that one.
Yeah. And they're cultural lenses, aren't they? I mean, they are lenses that have grown, as you just said, Katinka, it's grown up from which part, you know, where you lived in the world, what your culture was like, what the land was like, what you regarded as sacred. I mean, for me, the word sacred is really key to all of this, is because what do we hold as sacred? And, you know, whether that's in our bodies, in how we merge with another, regardless of what their gender is, that's, you know, where do we find the sacred in that interaction between us? And where do we find the sacred when we're in the landscape? Where do we find the sacred when we're, you know, walking the edge places? Where does that what does sacred mean for us? Feels like a question that requires us sometimes to be in a gendered state of mind, but not necessarily to place that into a specific gender. And yet as humans, we love to categorize. I mean, it's been part of our scientific reality over the last few hundred years that, you know, the more we can separate, the more we can refine, the more we can put things into groupings and label them, the happier we are. And yet the reality is that when we do come into a merging with one another in that union, then labels disappear at that point. So it's a bit like, you know, I totally agree with Katinka's the lens idea, because where you are in that lens, you know, how far out you pull, how far in you go from macro into micro, is where you find the necessity perhaps to gender. And at other levels, as you pull out, there's less necessity to gender at that point. So it's kind of, it's an and, isn't it? It's one of those lovely yes,
I love
no,
that.
and.
I also
love that.
I think it's also good, you know, to challenge ourselves in this, and to I know Nick Phillips, who is like a local artist here, and he sells his stuff on the Goddess Conference Market as well, and he has really dived into like queer divine, and you know, so like he made a picture of Bridget as queer, and I'm like, okay, so how do I feel about this, and what does that do for me? And it's nice to constantly keep reminded of that, the things that's like we talked before, that's what we put on, the lenses that we are looking through, and putting qualities we put on certain goddesses or gods, that comes from us. That comes from us. And there is in the divine energy, so you talked about, Andrea, about divine masculine, divine feminine, goddess and god, but actually in the divine energy, I don't feel any gender. So
I think
it's lift that up above our own lenses.
It's that for me. I think it's the labels and the divide and the qualities and the listing and all of that is all here. It's all here. But what we're talking about, sacred, divine union, the merging, is all heart. It's body. It's that knowing, it's the energy. And circling back to what you said, Marion, right at the beginning, there's a beautiful little book called How to Be More Tree. Don't know whether you've ever heard of it. And I think there's a lot to be said in that, just that idea of being grounded, rooted into an energetic space of presence, and not needing the filtering of all of the, you know, the putting it into boxes potentially.
I think as Louise said, it is an and. I don't think it's an either or. And really, for me, that, I mean, I like what you're saying, but if we're looking at sacred union, then what you're looking at, what is sacred and what is union, and really, if you put those two words together, what you get is sort of love. Or for me, it's what we love is how we get to experience sacred union, whether that is your sexual love partner, whether that's your child, whether that's your job or your devotional practice, whether that is the land, whether that is trees, whether that is animals, whether that is goddess or God. Yeah. And so for me, there's something here to not bypass that it takes all the parts of us, mind, heart, sex, intuition, subtle body, all of it. Nothing is left out in that. I think we have this, and so yes, it is gendered. Why wouldn't it be? But also it is, as you're saying, and Louise, you were saying that, and you were saying that, Caroline, that's how far out is the lens, you know? The further out, I really, what Marion was saying about there is no gender at all to that energy. And even to call it energy is we're already giving it a form now, because now we're thinking of what energy is look like in our minds, you know, or feels like for us. So, oh, it's love. Well, love, then we all have ideas about that. Yeah. And so what about if it's the other way around? Have all the ideas of what love is. How does it make you feel? How does it make you care? How does it make you reach towards? How does it make you want to be there? How does it make you feel alive? How does it make you experience it's not just you? You are not in isolation. And then through that, what is the experience of the divine? Anyway, I burble on too much. Sorry.
Can I pick something?
I love
from the
that.
book?
Love
Okay,
that.
I would love to pick something from the book of Katinka. Let's call it like that. That it's a reasoning that I belong to the population of trees, so I don't feel I necessarily belong to a gender, and I always work with the Goddess Conference in a way. So yeah, to me, divine masculine, feminine, a bit of a blurry concept. But I take it from the book of Katinka that she taught me something very, really important, and you can find more about the teachings at pathoflovemysteryschool.com. Please check it out. Which is about the wounding. So I might not be interested in experiencing the divine as feminine or masculine because it makes not necessarily sense to my life experience, but there is wounding. And during my lifetime as a I have a biological sex that drove my life in a certain way. I have experienced the wounding in a way or another. So I think there's an important message there when we gender the divine. I think it's a key for many of us to experience and heal things. So I don't stand for duality, and I would love to for that to come to an end or to an unrelevancy at some point. But it's true that, I mean, as women, you have experienced terrible pressures during your life, and you experienced many woundings because you were women, and your spirituality has been infected by that in a way, your life. So I think for many, the divine feminine concept, it's a way not only to experience the divine in a way that's finally accessible to them, but also to heal a relationship with their very own nature without feeling that the somebody else has control over it. And I think for the masculine, some of the movement I see arising, it's sometimes it's a tentative situation where you try to rebuild something that it's not made up with the society's rules of how gender should behave, and more like, how do I deeply connect with ultimately myself? So taking it from the book of Katinka, which is about there is healing and there is wounding, which is something she says and I really love very much. I think there is also this to consider when we talk about the gender divine. So even for the ones of us who don't belong to that realm, we need to consider all the wounding that the divide in society brings. So if it's a way of healing, I think it might be approachable in that way as well. So, and ultimately, yeah.
Ultimately, to experience the two within each other. So how would it be from that, what you're speaking into, that, you know, the wounding creates different forms, and this is very necessarily as part of the healing. And it is also the healthy that creates different forms. But what if we can find, say, the God within the goddess, you know? And I don't mean that in sexual explicitity here. I mean that in the energetics.
Yes.
What if we can find the goddess in the God? What we, as women, or as people who identify as feminine, can find the masculine within ourselves? How about if we as men can find the feminine within ourselves? And so this for me is the teachings of Sacred Union. This is what it points towards. This is which is, of course, beyond this very structured, gendered duality that you're speaking about, Andrea.
Is it not really about wholeness then? As you know, I mean, healing and wholeness, of course, is like we saw last year, is very close together. So it is that coming together of, as you say, you know, finding the divine masculine within. And I did a course with Katinka about that, and it's really something special. But it brings wholeness, and on the other side as well, to welcome the divine feminine, actually in myself as well, because I had a very strong masculine energy around me when I was growing up. To actually really welcome the divine feminine in me was also already, and I'm in a woman body, but it also brought me healing, because you grow
Absolutely.
up in a masculine world. You are asked to do all these things that are linked, or in the linked with men, and the way you grow up and the way you have to behave. And for me, that I lost divine feminine, and I'm a woman. So it's like, I think it is that wholeness, finding both of the duality in sacred union in yourself.
And
Beautiful.
that's where a lot of the teachings come from, isn't it? That you have to find that wholeness before you can go into whatever the sacred marriage is. So you have to be whole within yourself, and find and gather all of those pieces of yourself back together.
Absolutely.
So
I think that is the sacred marriage, or the hero's garments, is the outer expression of something that first is integrated on the inside. Definitely. How can it otherwise be? It's the seeking on the outside what you're lacking, which is part of the wounding, which is not wholeness. And I think wholeness, in whatever form we are experiencing it, because none of us are finished in that journey, also is what can give us. So it's both, it's the seeking of sacred union to create wholeness, but also wholeness giving you the experience of sacred union as a lived reality, and then into the divine experience of that field, whatever that is for each of us,
And you can almost turn it the other way, in that the divine wants to experience itself through us.
Absolutely. I love that.
Creative consciousness, part of how we bring our creativity, and how when we come together, the divine experiences itself.
That's sacred union itself, really.
That is sacred union,
because we're not separate. We're not separate from the divine.
This is a very beautiful concept, and I think we could go on for 4 hours on this, because it's very subject. It is, when you bring in sex and gender and divine, it's very long, but it is very long. But I really appreciate it. We have Katinka, go. I see.
No, I was just loving it.
Yeah,
I was having a little joy moment.
Lovely. And also, I think the message we want to spread as well is that these topics can be triggering for many people who are struggling with their sexuality as well, of their relationship work. It can be struggling, but I think I speak for all here, saying that the Goddess Conference is pretty an absolutely inclusive place for any kind of experiences that you have with your own sexuality, with your own divine perception. If you're into the queer divine and it has no come, let's bring it into union in a way, because again, it's a matter of focal lens, so we can see how also I think sometimes it's we get triggered by divine and masculine, feminine, and by duality, because once it's triggering, and then because it makes us reflect on where our triggers lie within, and these triggers are in a way something that neglects us to that union within that we long for. So it's deep reflection on sex, gender.
And it also may be that it triggers our loneliness. I mean, Caroline, you had something around that, huh?
Yeah, I was going to say about sacred union, and this conversation particularly is weaving in about relationship, but with the beauty of the conference is you do not need to be in a relationship looking for a love relationship to come and benefit from all of these conversations and the experiences that the conference is going to be weaving, because I think we've all reached and touched in the fact that it is very much about this inner experience, and the experience of, as Louise beautifully put, being in relationship with deity as beloved. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's I think it's really about, for me, it's really, and you said it already, Katinka, it's about love, and love is everybody has different thing, but how to practice love is really to open your mind, open your heart, challenge your own preconceptions, and just receive and allow that's all what is there to experience that. And that's a very, very personal process. It's not to do with relationship. It's not to do with the other. It's actually really to do with your own experience of the divine, and nothing to do with relationships as such. And then you can bring that in a relationship, like Louise also said about heroes karmas. But it's a constant being challenged and being invited and being opened. And yeah, it's just a beautiful experience.
So thank you so much to all of you for the beautiful contribution of today. I invite you once again to check out, sorry for the advertising here, but it's really poignant to this episode. Please check pathoflovemysteryschool.com. It's not just Katinka's website, but also it's where all her offerings are. And I can tell you, they are exactly about this discovery, this continuous research, this in-depth journey within not just the theoretical concept of divinity, but also the sexuality, the sacred sexuality, and it's a great benefit for all couples, singles. Check it out, and many other offerings from Katinka. Please check out Louise Taria books. She's an amazing author, of course, and we all love her. But I think what she writes is also third layer, fourth layer of meaning that we can weave into our lives and the way that behaves with sexuality and sacred union in this case. So please check her out. Caroline Stevens is a current copy of offering, so please check her out on hypnotherapy, creative arts, and all the processing. And she recently opened a new page, which is a temple online. If you check it on Facebook, it's a sacred temple to Brigid. So thank you so much, Caroline. And I would love to take a minute again for Marion Brigantia. She is not only the weaver of the Goddess Conference, but as you know, she is bringing on the flame of Brigid Brigantia, Brigide, in a marvelous way. She has a book out that's been out for a bit now, since last Goddess Conference, but it's still available, so please check her out the website. And also she has in-depth trainings for Brigide and Brigid in person, in Avalon, online. Please check her out if you want to ignite your flame. It's marvelous. I have the luck to be here with this wonderful panel, and I want to remind you another tiny thing really relevant. The Goddess Conference runs from the 23rd of August, but that's not the most spicy thing I could say. The most spicy thing I could say is that the next topic that we'll meet here for in 2 weeks is called the Tantra Files. So it's a bit spicy in a way that Katinka loves this topic, but also we'll get to discuss something that I have little knowledge about, and I'm desperate to know more. So if you, like me, have no clue about it all and want to know more, this is the episode for you. So come and join us for the Tantra Files with agents, students, and many more to follow. And please visit goddessconference.com for our wonderful cornucopia of tickets. They're waiting for you. Please come in person in Avalon. It's important. Support this beautiful event. We wait for you. Again, from all of us, much love and bye. See you next time.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Bye.
Bye.